One of the more common horror story tropes is a spooky abandoned building nestled deep inside of a forest, usually with some unsettling stuff being discovered when the protagonist enters. Well, as has been the case countless times before, life imitates art. Back in March of 2014, one such abandoned building was discovered in Soka Forest in Ibadan, Nigeria. What awaited inside was one of the most shocking discoveries of the last decade. A little background is necessary before we dive into specifics. Ibadan is the capital and most populous city of Oyo State in Nigeria. It's the third largest city by population in the entire country, with over 6 million people within its metropolitan area. Getting around a city this huge and bustling can be difficult, which necessitates the large number of motorcycle taxis throughout the area. These motorcycle taxis are locally known as okadas. Though the okadas are competing for customers, they're a tight-knit community and often remain in these same social circles or communicate with each other about work. In early 2014, 2 known Ibadan okadas went missing without a trace, which put the rest of the group on high alert. Fast forward to March of 2014, a third Okada member named Lanri Saduki went missing while he was working. When he did not return to the customary meeting spot, his fellow taxi drivers became worried. They attempted to call him, but his phone was turned off. This was extremely unusual, as making and receiving phone calls is a large part of an Okada's daily routine for getting customers. It was at this point they knew something was definitely wrong. Only a few minutes passed before one of the riders received a phone call from a number that he didn't recognize. When he picked up, it was Lanre, calling from his personal cell phone instead of his work phone. He explained frantically that he had been kidnapped and dragged to an incredibly strange area within the forest. His captors had seized his work phone, but didn't manage to find his personal one. In the background, there were other captured victims crying and screaming out for help. Lanre explained that they were corralled into some sort of underground containment room. It was pitch black, but they were able to hear footsteps above them, and they had no idea what their captors had planned for them. After explaining his situation, Lanre conveyed as specifically as he could remember the exact location his mysterious kidnappers had taken him to. He described the entrance to the footpath leading into the Soka Forest, a dense stretch of vegetation lying in the outskirts of Ibadan. His fellow Okadas prepared to head to the Soka Forest in an effort to find and rescue Lanre. They advised him to stay on the phone with them, but after a few minutes, his phone cut out almost completely. When they tried calling him back, his phone was off. Around 40 Okadas sped off towards the point that Lanre had described. Eventually, they reached an opening in the forest that appeared similar to his description, and they found the footpath he had supposedly been referring to. The footpath was relatively narrow, so they started their trek into the forest in a large single-file line. After walking quite a ways, the man at the front of the line thought that he had heard something out of the ordinary, so he signaled everyone to remain quiet. Breaking the silence was an unknown man a short distance in front of them that leapt out from behind some vegetation and began screaming at them. He pulled out a firearm and began firing in their direction. The group of 40 men were all unarmed, so they began frantically running back to their bikes, trying to avoid being shot. The local police proved to be ineffective with past incidents, so the men decided to arm themselves and rally an additional 60 Okadas to join them and stage a wide-scale rescue mission. Upon returning to the Soka Forest, they readied their weapons and charged back towards the area they had previously been shot at. They made sure to let loose screams and chants to warn any gunmen or any other forms of resistance that they were coming in droves. Instead of being shot at again, they were met with zero resistance, and there didn't appear to be anyone remaining in the forest. A little ways past where they had been shot at, they came out into a giant clearing. The wide open area had a small river, and on the other side were 2 deteriorating buildings, a tiny black shed and a large brick warehouse. Upon reaching the riverbank, some of the men noticed what they believed to be Lanre's motorcycle left abandoned. They knew they were in the right area, and they continued to search for answers. The men first approached the black shed. They carefully peeked inside, but there wasn't anyone around. Instead, they were met with the discovery of hundreds of articles of clothing littering the floor. Unsure what to make of this, they moved on to the much larger abandoned warehouse nearby. Upon approaching the building, the first thing that hit them was the rancid smell. It was hard to pinpoint what exactly it was, but it was very pungent and unpleasant. After walking around the large building, scanning the area for threats, some of the men found the entrance, which consisted of a large piece of sheet metal covering a gap in the building. The men removed the metal and made their way inside. What awaited them inside was nothing short of horrifying. There were human bones littering the ground, surrounding a large cement slab in the center of the room that had been used as a rudimentary operating table. Lining the walls of the room were people chained up, most barely conscious, all of them severely malnourished. The men had stumbled into a body part and an organ harvesting operation. Those who managed it sold human parts on the black market. In Nigeria, there is a subset of individuals who believe that certain magical potions will grant you all sorts of luxuries, such as wealth or a long life. Many of these potions' ingredients are believed to be human body parts, creating a demand for this incredibly inhuman operation. Those who lost limbs were often chained back up if it was believed they would survive. Otherwise, they were disposed of in the back of the warehouse. What the Okadas saw in the back of the warehouse included a guillotine and a very large live crocodile that was believed to be used for discarding victims that wouldn't survive their operations. After freeing the malnourished people chained to the walls, there were a total of 23 victims rescued. However, Lanre was not amongst them. The Okadas attempted to ask those chained up if they knew of any underground containment room, but they were so weak they couldn't speak. The operation had apparently been ongoing for nearly a decade. The police became involved after the severity of what was discovered got out. Their response to the situation was considered questionable and downright offensive by many, although police promised to help investigate and unearth the ground around the area to find the remaining missing victims. They never did. The police didn't hesitate to bulldoze the abandoned warehouse completely, and there was even a decision to build a school atop the same ground that once served as a human slaughterhouse. Lanre and the other victims he was with were never found. What do you think? Are you surprised that ritualistic activity like this still happens in modern times? Many believe the police's abysmal response indicates that they may have been involved in covering it up. Do you think that's the case? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have any other topics you'd like me to cover in the future, I'm all ears. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you back here next week with another mystery.